diving deeper. As you can see, I have a special guest with me here today, Eli Reeves, who actually was our guest speaker this morning with today's sermon. And so, Eli, I know today's message that you brought to us really, kind of dovetailed nicely in with Father's Day, talking about Abraham and Isaac. But you also kind of looked more at Abraham and Sarah's story as well, and in terms of, the thrust of your sermon was trusting God and using them as that example and showing how that trust weaved its way through their lives in the story that is, featured in the Bible. And so what I wanted to ask you is, with today, everything that goes on, all the distractions, all the confusion really, when you look around, in today's world, is it easy to trust God or to have that kind of, sincere trust that, was an earmark of Abraham and Sarah's story? And, can we still trust what God has to say for our lives?
Well, my answer is indeed, yes, we can. But it's a question, the question we're asking is really a question that people have been asking since the beginning of time. Can we trust God to do what he says and say what he doeth? He's going to do what he says, and he's going to help us accomplish what he wants. Because back then, he took Abraham out of his family, out of his country, out of everybody that was related to him. He had to leave, take his wife Sarah, and go into a foreign land that God was going to show him. And as a result of that, he said, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. So that's a real, sometimes a hard thing for people to understand, that God is going to say, I'm going to make you a great nation. And at that time, he was like 75 years old already. And he was thinking, oh, wait a minute. How do I make a great nation? How does God do that when I'm so old? See, that's the other thing. And then eventually when God gets around to Sarah having their first son, Isaac, she was in her 90s, and Abraham was over 100. So here again, even more of a difficulty, but yet finally Abraham and Sarah got the point. They can trust God, and God will do what he says.
Now, like you said, definitely, when you factor in the age of Abraham and Sarah, you can understand their how they might automatically default to, are we really willing to go along with this? This is crazy, given at that age, that they were. And I know people lived longer in local times, but still, that's up there for them. It's pointed out that they're both up there in age, and so. But I was thinking again, as you reminded us of their story, that also tracks with our lives today. It's one thing for us to say, yes, we can trust what God has to say, or follow, with yes, I've seen examples of that, of trusting God works out in the long run. But that brings up the other half of what I just mentioned, is trusting and then being willing to do what God says. And so I guess my question to you is, how important is it for us to be willing? I think that's the main crux going forward after listening to your sermon is, that's great, that worked for Abraham and Sarah, but am I willing? Are we as a people willing in today's day and age to still do what God asks of us?
Right. One of the things that I reflect back on is that back when I was becoming a missionary to go up to Minnesota, one of the questions I asked God was, can I really go? Can I really do what you want me to do? And God verbally said to me, at least I heard it in my mind, he says, you don't just stay in Arizona. The whole world is out there for you to go and do what I want you to do. So here again, I was going to a foreign land, so to speak, Minnesota. I've never been to Minnesota before. I didn't even know who I was going to stay with. I didn't know where I was going to live, how much it would cost. And of course, I went in in the winter months when it was really cold, and one day I got out to start my car and the thermometer on the car said 0. So that's how cold it was. But yet at the same time, God kept encouraging me. He said, do what I want you to do. Just follow my lead. I'm going to put people in your way, just like Abraham and Sarah. They had people in their lives that would direct them, that would show them. And it's hard sometimes, like Abraham and Sarah, for God to say to Abraham, everywhere you step in this new land, it's going to be yours. Mm-hmm. And I guess from our perspective, we'd be out there pounding all over the land because we know it's going to be ours. But yet, Abraham had to take that at faith value, so to speak. He had to do it. And by the time he got to the point where God asked him one last thing, was to take his only son, Isaac, and sacrifice him. Okay, Isaac didn't know that in the beginning, but he soon got the idea when Abraham tied him up and put him on the altar and raised the knife and was about ready to kill him. I think Abraham had it at that point, the absolute understanding and trust of God, that no matter what happened, God would take care of him. Mm. So that's really what I want people to get out of this, that we can trust God to do what he says and mean what he says.
And again, like you're saying, even with your example of going to the mission field at this stage in your life, that we have to be willing. It's one of those perfect unions of trusting, but then also doing our part to be willing to follow what God is asking of us.
Have to follow him. And like I said, I ended up in 2 or 3 days after leaving here, I ended up in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And I had the address of the place where I was going, which was out in the middle of nowhere, as far as it was south of Minneapolis. So it was in a very wooded area. I didn't know the people. I'd never met the people before. I didn't know who they were. They welcomed me into their home. They allowed me to stay there, and I had free reign. I had my own apartment, in the whole basement part of their house was like a raised ranch. Mm-hmm. So the basement was really, I had a bedroom, I had a living room, I had a bathroom, and it was just wonderful. In fact, they treated me better than I've been treated by other people in my life.
Sure.
They took me to church and introduced them to their friends. So that's the way it is. That's the way Abraham was too. He was meeting new people. He had God said he was going to turn him into a father of many nations, and it did turn out to be that way.
Very true. Very true. Well, Eli, I want to thank you for your time coming to sit and dive deeper with me this week. I want to wish all of you who are watching that are fathers or grandfathers a very happy Father's Day, and we hope you have a safe week, and we will see you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.